I now call to order this work session of the Anchorage Assembly regarding AO 2023-35, amending AMC Chapter 3.102, municipal use of surveillance technologies to ban the acquisition, use, or accessing of facial recognition technology with limited exceptions. It is Friday, March 24, 2023. We are scheduled from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. today. It is 1:30 p.m. Documents for this work session are available at muni.org/worksessions, and we'll go ahead and start with Assembly member introductions for the record.
Pete Peterson.
Daniel Voland.
Felix Rivera.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Joey Sweet.
And on the phone, we have Ms. Dern. Ms. Dern. Ms. Quinn Davidson. Mr. Solt. Do I have any assembly members on the phone? Okay, I know. Okay, we're going to address a technical issue here because we should have 4 assembly members on the line. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. We're also joined by Acting Municipal Manager Kent Colhase, and I see Chief Curl here as well. You're welcome to come up here, Chief. And Ann Helzer, Acting Municipal Attorney, why don't you come up too, if you will? Thanks for joining. And with that, I will turn it over to one of the sponsors, Mr. Sweet.
Yeah, so
One moment here. Let's just check the phone. Can anyone on the phone hear us? I just got a message that they can't hear anything.
Unmuted.
Can you hear us now? Assembly members on the phone?
I'm here. Thank you.
I hear you.
So we've got Kevin Cross, Randy Solt, both of you. Anyone else?
I'm here, Robin Dern.
I'm
here too, Suzanne.
And Ms. Quinn Davidson. Okay, great. All right, go ahead, Mr. Sweet.
yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is what I've been talking about since when I was appointed to the position. To elaborate, I know a bunch of us were available for the Public Safety Committee meeting where I introduced this, albeit in a sort of abbreviated manner. But what it really all boils down to is this is technology that seems promising and just doesn't actually work. And I don't want our municipality to get into a position where we think that we're buying some miracle elixir when in reality, we're just setting ourselves up for failure. I won't go through necessarily each case that is detailed in the handout, but there are 5 publicly known situations where someone has been arrested because of in some way, facial recognition technology was used and used incorrectly. One of them is not included because there's just a dearth of information about that particular case, but that's why there are 4 listed, but there are 5 that are, and I say that very carefully because publicly known, the lack of federal regulation on this issue also means there's no requirement that law enforcement disclose that facial recognition technology was used to the person they arrest because of it. One of the cases actually details that a person was arrested. The cases are starting to run together for me, but I believe one of them was arrested and in jail for 10 days before he was even told, oh, this is because of facial recognition technology. In each of these cases, to my understanding, the person who was arrested was then able to sue their municipality. Some of the settlements have already been paid out. Some are still winding their way through the court system. I also looked specifically for examples that show what the image is that was fed into the algorithm and the image of the person who was actually arrested. Surprisingly, again, kind of a dearth of information on that one, but for those of us who were here, you can see I was able to find 2 examples, and just any human being can look at these images and tell you these are clearly 2 different people in both circumstances, particularly the one on the second page, a very egregious example. One person has tattoos, the other doesn't. I mean, one's taller, one's shorter. The one really worth highlighting, well, I'd say there are 2. The first and the last. The first is the gentleman I referenced at the Public Safety Committee meeting, Robert Williams. That's the first publicly known instance. That's detailed at length in the attached New York Times article about it. The last, though, the gentleman's name is Randall Reed. This one's really egregious because, as detailed, I'll just read it. There's a 20-year age difference between the person they accused and the person who actually did it. Reed, the person who was arrested, has noticeable gaps in his teeth. The perpetrator does not. Reed is a full 7 inches taller than the perpetrator, and Reed walks with a slight limp, something that was not present in the video of the crime he was arrested for. So just really egregious misuses. And it's even tough to say it's a misuse because, again, with no federal regulations, requirements, oversight, who's to say what is being used incorrectly or what is not being used correctly, right? It's our own sort of values as individuals. And, you know, the reason I wanted to focus on this is because I think it's doable as a policy within the 107 days that I am a member of this body. To talk a bit about the actual legislation, it's also included. I highlighted 3 sort of points on that last page. The one that really interests me is creating a surveillance report. This is based off other legislation from similar ordinances in other municipalities throughout the country. To my understanding, in code, we have something related to this already for the use of drones, and this just sort of marries this technology in with that technology. And then the second, of course, the big one is what do we exactly mean when we say ban? That in this instance takes the form of preventing us from acquiring or using facial recognition technology for its own sake. There are obvious carve-outs for, we give out municipal owned iPhones and they use Face ID. Obviously you can use those. That's not what we're worried about with this legislation. But number 3 is the one that I really want to try and have some debate on because, you know, this is technology that will be iterative, it will improve over time, and it will ease some of the primary concerns that I have. And so section C under exceptions described on pages 4 and 5 discusses how it creates sort of a path for allowing future carve-outs on an ad hoc sort of basis. The example that I always go to outside of a strict law enforcement application is using it to replace municipal badges. If you have a facial recognition system, you can upload your face into it. And then from there, you can use that to gain entry into your workplace as opposed to having a badge. My concern and the point of contention that I have is whether or not this is going to sort of normalize the use of facial recognition and the use of, you know, surveillance in this regard. And then maybe we're not acquiring it today, but then whatever, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, oh, well, we use facial recognition all the time. What's the matter if we get into the business of it in all these other fields? And then next thing you know, what we're left with is a ban with so many exceptions that it was never really a ban. But that's the will of the body, not just myself. And part of the real purpose of the work session that I want to drill into is how does everyone feel about that? Because although my primary concern is from a sort of privacy and racial justice perspective, there's also just a normative concern with we value our privacy. Is this section something that we want to include? I'm not really committed one way or the other. That's what I wanted us to sort of discuss here. Obviously, I want to turn the mic over to Chief Curl. I suppose that's everything I had. If there are concerns and perspectives, we met weeks ago for context, the chief, the deputy, and I, and discussed this in its sort of formation stages. So just wanted that out there on the record, but yeah.
Good afternoon. So we did meet, and obviously you didn't listen to what we said because I'm going to go over some things. I'm going to read something first, and then I'm going to discuss some of the things that you mentioned. So across the country, real-world examples of law enforcement using facial recognition technology to solve major crimes, find exploited missing children and adults, showcases just how important this technology can be towards protecting our communities. Technology does not replace investigative techniques and procedures. It supplements them. If you should create standards and safeguards governing the use of facial recognition technology that both defends the public from misuse and privacy violations, but allows law enforcement to use it towards our public safety goals. Several cities have considered or will ban real-time facial recognition surveillance by law enforcement. Police can still use footage from personally owned devices, such as Nest cameras, to find criminals. It's just not allowing the government entities to use live facial recognition software. There's a big difference. Of those 5 examples you gave, and I've said this many times, that the police department is the only department, police across the nation are the only people that are collectively judged on individual actions. There are over 17,000 law enforcement agencies across the country. And we're going to base a ban of facial recognition on 5 cases where you can't blame the facial recognition software. You blame the departments for doing shoddy police work. Facial recognition should not be used as probable cause. It's a supplemental tool. It will help identify possible suspects. And then the police agency should follow up to establish probable cause to find out if the person that was identified in facial recognition is indeed the suspect. These cases here, it's terrible police work. All of it is. And that would never happen here. When this first came out, I actually wondered what you thought, what you think my police department. It almost feels like I'm going to use, you mentioned, and I'm not sure if you guys have read his dissertation for his master's. You mentioned, which one? Tom Cruise's Minority Report. I'm going to refer to George Orwell's 1984. I mean, that's almost like you think we're going to go out there with technology and live scan everybody and then put it in a database. That's not how this will be used. Downtown Partnership and all the communities downtown, they're getting stuff stolen from them. They have pictures of it. If we can identify the people in a picture, it would be nice to be able to take that picture, put it through some sort of database and identify a possible suspect, and then go out there and actually investigate it. We already do. We use facial recognition right now. When I say that, we get a photo of somebody and we put it out on social media and say, hey, does anyone recognize this picture? That's how we do it now. Is there a difference? And there's no live facial recognition whatsoever. And none of this total ban, it's on, like I said, we don't use facial recognition software at all. We don't have the ability to do it. And I just don't understand where this is coming from. What the opinion of the police department is that we would think to ban this. What do you think we are actually going to use facial recognition software for? Because the only thing we would ever use it for is for an investigative tool that would supplement our ongoing investigation. So a total ban to me at this time just seems uncalled for, unnecessary. And I guess that's all. If anyone has any questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Cross.
Yeah, my question is probably more for Joey Sweet, and Chief Curl can chime in. So facial recognition software, and I'm like, my thought on that is that we're using software in order to identify a unique attribute about an individual in order to verify identification. How is this any different than using fingerprints? I mean, granted, it's facial, but we use technology in order to discern fingerprints. And in the history of using fingerprints, how many individuals were mistakenly identified and imprisoned because of fingerprints left behind that were errors, either in human judgment or the like, or even our own brains are identifier of facial features, and how many individuals have been imprisoned wrongly because of individuals falsely identified or poor memory. So I see where it's being used as a tool, but more specifically, how does this differentiate from us utilizing technology for fingerprints, which is another unique human attribute that we use for identification? Thank you.
I think there's a couple distinctions. The first is this is just a much more advanced form of technology. And with that, I think we should have a higher standard. We should have a more thorough debate about, I suppose there are really a number of differences. For number one, you can take somebody's face without their consent. It's a lot harder to get somebody's fingerprint without their consent, right? I could pull my phone out right now and take a photo of anybody in this room and run it through open source, publicly available software that could either be right or wrong, and then boom, so it's a lot harder for me to be able to try and steal somebody's fingerprint, right? That's another concern as to, if your passwords get leaked, whatever, you change your password. But if you can't really do that with somebody's very face, right? I think the potential for misuse and abuse is just too significant. Part of what animated, I know, Mr. Rivera to reach out to me and ask about being a co-sponsor was how this technology is being used in New York City currently. Perhaps I should have included more articles, but to briefly go over this case study, what's happening there is the company that owns Madison Square Garden is using facial recognition technology for security purposes, but not just traditional, the examples you gave of thefts and break-ins. What they're using it for is political retaliation. What they have done, the company that owns Madison Square Garden is engaged in a lawsuit of some kind, and the firm that is representing their opposition, they went on that firm's website, found the photos of everyone who works there, uploaded pictures of those people into a database, and are using facial recognition to prevent any of those people from entering Madison Square Garden, including if they purchase a ticket to go to an event like any customer off the street. And I'm not saying that necessarily Anchorage, Alaska is working its way towards something exactly like that. But what this ordinance does is prevent us from ever getting into that business as a municipality in the first place. I was working with an activist organization on this called Fight for the Future. And that's really, sorry for being dramatic, but that's kind of what this is. We're talking about the future of what civil liberty, privacy, and freedom looks like in this country and in this city. And so that's really what, to sum up my whole motivation, that's kind of what it all boils down to. I think using something like social media and saying, does anybody know this person? I have no problem with that. That's just a more advanced version of what people were doing a century or two ago in regards to law enforcement. But using faulty algorithms, using computers, there's an IBM management manual that was published in like 1979 that says a computer should never make a decision because a computer cannot be held accountable. And that was all the way back in the 70s. And look where we are. Computers are making decisions all the time with absolutely no accountability. So the purpose of this is to push back against that and to draw a line in the sand in our community.
This is Chief Curl again. So Mr. Sweet covered this a little bit. They use algorithms for facial recognition, and the algorithms determine there's a whole bunch of things that goes on here. And there have been some disparities in the past where the algorithms for minority men and women, Asians, were different. But as technology has evolved, there are different companies. I just came back from Miami 3 weeks ago where they use facial recognition there. And the company they use, and the reason they sell it, is that they're 99% accuracy with the company they use. And there's safeguards that can be put in place that way to make sure that the software that is used, the algorithms that they use, we can say you have to be at least 99% accurate. And that'll prevent things. And again, this is just to identify possible suspects. It's a tool. And then from there, you'd establish probable cause for an actual arrest. And the instance where the guy is 7 inches shorter, I mean, any decent law enforcement agency would have gone there and said, obviously, this is the wrong person. Like I said, the shoddy police work should not be used as an example of why we should ban this technology.
Thanks, Chief. I've got a few members in the queue. Next is Mr. Solt, Ms. Dern, and then Mr. Voland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I hear what Chief Curl's saying, and Mr. Sweet, I think your argument why we should ban facial recognition software always speaks to the uses, to whoever uses it. We use recognition software all the time in the work I do, not facial, but otherwise. And it highlights flags items for a human to intervene. And as Chief Curl said, I think you have any tool that can be manipulated and used improperly by people. And that's the root cause. So, and make an analogy, vehicles kill pedestrians every year in Anchorage, and therefore we should ban vehicles. That's not the root cause. The vehicles are not what's killing it. It's the operator, it's alcohol, it's other items, weather, pedestrians. So, and it's also a question of the greater good here. So if this software may identify a few wrong faces, and then APD uses the information correctly and does not pursue those faces, but at the same time identifies hundreds of criminals correctly, and we put those people away, we get them help, we stop them from committing further crimes, potentially murder. It's a clear case. We shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We should use the technology correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sold. Ms. Dern?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up on that, I'm wondering if both the chief and Joey might address what are there technologies on the horizon that either of you are aware of that are trying to solve these problems? Are there protocols that are in place, nationally, rules, ethics, regulations that have been established elsewhere that are working to make sure that we're not falsely incarcerating or in any way accusing people on a broad scale? Is there a tool that we're using, from a regulatory standpoint to try and work through this problem anywhere that seems to be working out? I'll let you both answer. Thank you.
This is Chief Curl. So like Mr. Sweet said, there's very few regulations on this. And I just want to say, we have no intention of using this anytime soon. We haven't even looked at this. We just thought the total ban was, we just didn't understand why. But in Miami, their policies and procedures actually guide when they can use it. And the Miami policies and procedures, again, never can be used as for probable cause. And they have other guidelines in there. They limit the number of people who have access to facial recognition software. So it's done by a certain department in their certain section in their department. And they have just other policies in place that prevent the misuse of the potential misuse of any facial recognition software. They recognize that it's a tool, it's a supplementary tool, and it goes to augments other investigative techniques and procedures. So that's how they deal with it in Miami. I'm sure that's how they deal with it in other places. Obviously, there are some places that don't have any rules at all, because there are examples of where it led to the incarceration of the wrong people.
Any follow-up, Ms. Dern?
No, thank you, Chief.
Thank you. One moment, and then I have two other members in the queue, but I'll go to the sponsor in a second. I just want to remind all the members too that work sessions are for fact-finding, and we really need to make an effort to refrain from debate. It's okay if you want to talk about an amendment you'd like to see or some aspect you want to be addressed. And I should have reminded everybody about that when we started. But if we could just try to do that, that'd be great. Go ahead, Mr. Sweet, real quick, and then we'll go to Mr. Voland and Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Yeah. So in terms of things like regulations, there's a really good one on the books for the state of Massachusetts. I won't get too bogged down into the weeds about this, but different municipalities were banning it throughout the state. And so their state legislature stepped in and created a regulatory regime to my knowledge, it's about the only one, I believe, in America at this point that is statewide. Public Administration 101, there's a patchwork of, there are no regulations here, strict regulations here, somewhere in the middle over here, as opposed to, again, absence of federal rules. States have made up their own. Well, one state has. Mostly this is a municipal level thing. This is also another reason why I brought it forward. I was like, well, other cities are doing this. We can kind of hop on a bandwagon with this. In the interest of time, I'll go ahead and stop there.
Thanks. Next is Mr. Volan and then Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to sort of raise the same point of order that this is more about information and how people would want to see the legislation improved. But given that we have ventured a little bit into debate, I think it reaffirms for me that we should keep the exception portion in there. It's interesting to hear from Chief Curl that there's no immediate plans to implement this technology. I think a concern that I have about the technology as a co-sponsor is just that it's not where it needs to be yet to have the reliability of fingerprint technology or DNA technology. But with this exception in there, there's an opportunity for Chief Curl and his department in the future to have the Assembly approve the use of this technology under certain conditions. So I think we should keep that in there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Volan. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that Dan somewhat spoke to this, and Joey might have as well, but I was going to ask, why ban this versus...
Austin, sorry to interrupt you. We're having a hard time hearing you. Could you speak up just a bit?
Okay, I can try
Perfect.
to speak up. Is
Thanks.
that helpful?
Yes, it's great. Thanks.
Okay, great. Can folks turn their mics off, please? Thanks. Sorry, it was probably just yours, Suzanne. I guess my question is, and Dan spoke a little bit to it, but why ban this instead of lay out rules for, should the department start using this technology, the following steps need to take place, or the following things need to be evaluated, or it can only be used in these circumstances. It feels a little extreme to me to ban something versus that we're not even using versus lay out an approach. And I don't know quite how to do that, I guess, in code. But yeah, my question is, did you consider that, and why wouldn't that work here?
I think I have two responses. The first is the sort of pathway that is discussed on pages 4 and 5 is very much a compromise in that regard. I think that section addresses your exact concerns, which is it clarifies a process where if a municipal entity wants to use it, they can come before the Assembly, lay out their case, and explain, here's the vendor we're using, here's how it's going to be used, here's what our P&Ps will look like, and then the Assembly can make that determination from there. So I think the concern is somewhat addressed within that section. My second point, your phrasing of it is, ban something that we're not using. I think that's the exact reason why we should ban it at this point, is preemptively. Let's not wait until something does go wrong, as I do believe that it would on a long enough timeline, given the poor quality of facial recognition algorithms currently. I mentioned at the Public Safety Committee meeting, but oftentimes policy ends up being reactive instead of proactive. Something goes wrong and then everybody slaps their foreheads and says, oh, who let this happen? I'm interested in not having it happen in the first place. And I think that that's another reason why we should ban it, is not even to get into this in the first place. To the extent that people wish to compromise, I understand that. And that's what pages 4 and 5 lay out. Detail to us exactly how it's going to be used. What are your policies? How are you going to ensure the requisite privacy protections? And then it's up to the Assembly to sort of adjudicate it at that point. I suppose now would be as good a time as any to point out we already just lived through a real life example of a surveillance system being abused for the purpose of spying on whistleblowers with the scandal at the ombudsman's office. We, to some extent, we can create P&Ps, we can have everything written down, but all it takes is a single bad actor and the whole house of cards comes crashing down. So I think, hypothetically, what if we were already in the facial recognition business when that happened? It would be that much worse, right? So I like a ban because it's preemptive. I like it because it's simple. To the extent that folks want to compromise, I believe that's what pages 4 and 5, that's what those pages answer, right? So that's what I have to say.
Any follow-up, Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes, please. I think there's probably more than one bad actor around City Hall, but anyway, I digress. I guess it feels like to me this is a little bit of semantics. Like it sounds like you're both the chief and the sponsors are saying something similar, which is we don't want to outright ban this and we don't want to allow it universally with no regulations. So I'm just wondering if there's some way we can all feel good about this product. And I guess my question then is to the chief, given what Joey just described, why doesn't that feel right for APD? Like what changes would it take? And is it just language changes to make it feel workable?
Again, I agree with what you initially said, where we should create the standards and safeguards governing the use instead of the outright ban. I mean, you can have exceptions in there, but the fact of the matter is it's still banned. And it just, it seems like I disagree that the technology isn't there. I've seen the technology act. I've seen it 99% accuracy. I've seen how it's properly used. And it just seems like this is a look at the police department and that we're an Orwellian faction that we just want to go out there and we're going to have body cameras going around just do real-time facial recognition. To me, the only thing that should be banned is real-time facial recognition. And that's the only thing. Everything else, they're investigative techniques. And this just seems like a giant step for something, like he said, he's joined with a radical group who wants to ban
Point
this.
of order.
Go ahead, Mr. Voland.
I don't think we need to be making characterizations like that.
Well, no, he mentioned that.
Okay,
He said
number
that.
one. Number two, what I would invite APD to do is to submit testimony via email on how they would like to see this item amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Voland.
And we can do that.
Thank you, Chief. And let's see, Ms. Quinn Davidson had the floor. Was your question answered, Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yeah, well, not completely. It feels to me that maybe the chief wants to have more exceptions, that the exception is sort of the rule, and then there's only certain pieces banned, and the sponsors want to have a ban with certain exceptions. And so I guess I'm just still interested in and hopeful that if we all somewhat agree on that the sponsors and the chief could work together on that. And so thank you, Mr. Voland, for asking for amendments. I think that would be great. I guess just a comment too that, Chief Curl, I don't think you should take it personally or assume that the sponsors have bad intent or think poorly of APD. Our job is to write code that regulates departments, and that's what we do with all kinds of departments. Anyway, and if you feel bad for being singled out by actions of a couple, just imagine being a lawyer. You'll feel a lot better. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Anyone else? Go ahead, Ms. Helzer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question. I just wanted to understand if you could maybe explain when this is, if it's used in I'm thinking of practical examples like somebody broke into my car. It was captured on my home video system. If I were to turn something like that in to the police, can you explain the process of receiving some information like that and then somebody reaching a conviction? And I feel like there's a big blurred area there for people who are maybe unfamiliar with the process of what you call probable cause, and then how that leads to a, ultimate conviction of a crime.
Like I said, we don't use this now, but in the future, if we did use it in the future, say I can tell you one example I know that it was used in is they found here in Alaska, it was used by the troopers where they found a deceased woman. They looked in her phone. There was a picture of a gentleman they thought might have been the suspect. They were able to identify who that person was through some sort of facial recognition. And they contacted him and determined he wasn't involved. Whereas if they did find that person, he's a person of interest, they would then start the investigation with him as a suspect, determine if there was enough probable cause for an arrest. In other words, they could put enough pieces together that showed that that person was actually responsible for the person's death. Then they would establish probable cause. It would go before a judge to get a warrant. If the warrant was issued, they'd arrest them and then would eventually go to trial. So there's a lot of steps in there that would, to have probable cause, all probable cause means is you have enough information to arrest the person. It doesn't mean they're guilty. It's just that there's enough facts there that it shows that that person is not overwhelming, but there's enough doubt there that would indicate that person committed the crime. And from there, you would build your case from there.
Through the chair, just so I understand, so I can break this down. So you're saying that, or perhaps I need some understanding on how this would, if it's not used at all, in the scenario that you're talking about, it would only be used for the purpose of establishing whether there was enough evidence to move forward with an arrest. And at that point, they have other rights.
Actually, it would only be used to identify a possible suspect.
Okay.
So that's all it would be used for. It would be, okay, it would develop a person of interest. And from there, the probable cause would be, the investigation would continue. So that's where all your investigative tools and all of your procedures would be used to try to see if that person of interest is actually, if you could develop probable cause for that person or another person. So all it is, it just identifies a person of interest in a crime. That's all we do. At least that's how we would use it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Volan.
Thank you. Does APD currently have policies and procedures regarding facial recognition technology?
We do not.
Okay.
Like I said, we don't use it at all.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Go ahead, Mr. Peterson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I was reading through this information that Mr. Sweet provided, and it seems like this technology has a tendency to confuse the faces of minority members more often than Caucasian members. And that we live in a city that is becoming more diverse every day. And so the use of this unfortunate, maybe technology that is not totally perfected, we'll say at this point, could create problems in the minority community if unfortunately someone was misidentified. And I'm hopefully nothing like that would happen, but unfortunately it's happened in other locations, jurisdictions already. So
And
anyway.
it's based on the algorithms by the certain company. And I can tell you the algorithms now from, at least, I'm not going to say every company, but the algorithms of several companies, they're 99% accurate for everyone. Minorities, everyone included, it's 99% accuracy. And the cases that Mr. Sweet has mentioned, there are some of the companies they're not that good. Their algorithm, you can't tell who designed their algorithms, but it's terrible technology. That's why we would never go with terrible technology. You go with the best technology, and technology is constantly evolving. And I'm not sure how. I guess your paper's about 2 years old, so technology has evolved since then. And like I said, I was in Miami 3 weeks ago. We were in their real-time crime center. They have facial recognition, and we asked him, "What is your accuracy for minorities?" And he said it's 99% accurate.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Peterson. Go ahead, Mr. Stolt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Chief Curl, I just want to make sure that you're, I guess, a question around facial recognition software. So, if you take fingerprints, I assume you put them in some sort of database to get a match. So, I think you've answered this, but I want to be clear. So, do you do that with any photo you might have of someone, a mugshot or a still photo that you get? Or do you plan on doing that with maybe body cam footage, putting that into some sort of database that helps you find or identify the person, or are you just posting on Facebook and things like that? Thank you.
We do not. The facial recognition software is used in some states, and I believe Massachusetts is one of them, where the database they use is the DMV database. So everyone's required to have a picture in DMV, and they actually allow, I believe it's Massachusetts, allows the DMV to use facial recognition software, but they don't allow the police. They do in certain aspects. Actually, I won't say they don't. The Massachusetts law, they do allow some police to use facial recognition software, and it's only the state police. But we don't have a database like that. I know the prison system probably has some sort of database. I've seen photos of the prisoner IDs, so I assume that they would have a database as well. But APD does not have any database at all. We do have access to the Department of Motor Vehicles database. Right now, we do a thing called photo lineups, where we go in and when we have a photo of a suspect, we actually go in and produce a lineup, and we try to find 6 people that are similar in appearance, and then we have people pick the people out of the photo lineup. So that's the only thing that we do currently.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solz. Any other questions or thoughts from members? Okay, this, it will be before the body at the meeting of April 11, I believe. And I know there's been a request for some work on amendments. Any final questions, comments from the sponsors?
Well, I'll just say thank you. I think this has been a productive discussion. And yeah, this is the point of a work session at its most productive, I think, is to get the feedback and to see how the legislation can be improved. So whether that's from Chief Curl and his team or from other members, please bring us your thoughts and ideas. Thanks.
Go ahead, Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate the work that Mr. Sweet did and all of the research to come up with the proposal. It sounds like the police chief is going to possibly send us some thoughts and amendments, which we can consider incorporating either into an S version or just have amendments brought forward on the floor. Looking forward to that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. And if members have amendments, to send them to our council so that we comply with the Open Meetings Act. Mr. Sweet, anything final?
I'll just circle back around to the point on justifying the ban. And that is, like I said, at the end of the day, all it takes is one bad actor within the system to abuse it, which there are other real world cases of that from other municipalities abusing other kinds of surveillance tools. a town in California, they got license plate reader technologies, and within the week of getting it, one of the people with access to it used it to stalk his ex-wife. I mean, that's all it takes. And we lived through one about 2 months ago. In terms of sort of a point of information, do work sessions, do we do audience participation?
No, we do not typically do audience participation.
That's all then. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for everybody. Appreciate your time and thank you all for being here. With that, we are adjourned.